Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been following very closely the negotiations that is taking place formally and informally between Mexico and the United States. As you know, um, the President Donald Trump has threatened to impose sanctions and tariffs on Mexican products if Mexico does not reduce the flow of fentanyl and migrants to the United States. And we, as you heard on the top of the hour, among the things that the Mexican government has done is to, I don't know if the correct word is extradite, but they delivered 29 individuals, very dangerous individuals who are either members or head criminal cartels here in Mexico, including Caro Quintero, who is being accused of having murdered a DEA agent 40 years ago. But so we've been following that very closely, and it's very confusing what's going on. But I think we have stopped, or we haven't been paying close attention to what's happening with a couple of very important events that's going to be taking place in Mexico, including judicial elections. We will be electing judges in Mexico, despite all the problems in trying to get this election to take place. It's going to happen in June. And there's still a lot of question marks as to what could potentially happen. Joining us today is Benito Nacif. You know him well. He's been joining us throughout the years. He's a former commissioner at the National Federal Institute, IFE. I guess it was IFE, right? At the time, Federal Electoral. It's changed name. Now it's INE. Welcome to the show, Benito. Can you just give us an update where we are right now in terms of elections of judges taking place in Mexico? Welcome to Living in Mexico.
Thank you, Ana Maria, for the invitation. Well, I think that the government has been able to move forward the judicial elections. It was able also to overcome obstacles that that were in their way. One of them was the amparo suits that were promoted against against the implementation of these judicial elections. That obstacle now has been removed, thanks to the intervention first of the electoral tribunal, and then the Supreme Court itself. INE has been making adjustments so they can move forward with the organization of these elections with the limited resources that were provided in the 2025 annual budget for the electoral authorities. They reduced the number of polling stations that are going to be installed on election day so that they can reduce significantly the cost of organizing these elections. And so in a matter of weeks, on the 28th of March, the campaigns will start. And right now, there is only uncertainty as to whether these elections are going to have a acceptable rate of turnout. I mean, I am very skeptic about that. The polls that I've seen published recently show that very few people among the Mexican electorate are aware that we are going to have these elections on the first Sunday of June. So INE has to deploy a very successful um, campaign to inform the electorate that they have to participate in this election, that this election are going to take place, and educate us to what is at stake in these elections for them. Yeah, it's not an easy task for INE, and I think right now that is the main hurdle that the electoral authorities have going forward in regards to the organization of these elections.
Let me ask you this. There has been a lot of reporting in terms of difficulties and mistakes being made by forming the lists and trying to get the ballots published. I mean, those are some of the issues that I have identified. Um, so at what point, I mean, have you identified any of the other issues? I mean, are these issues serious enough that would stop the elections from taking place?
I mean, those are very serious issues, and some of them have been attended and resolved thanks to the intervention of INE. The registration of candidates in the process of organizing an election is a very delicate issue, and in this case, it was delegated to the Senate, and the Senate did a very poor job. So when INE received the list of candidates, there were lots of mistakes. Some of them were corrected, and finally, the INE was able to give the go ahead with the printing of the ballots. So I think that hurdle was overcome by INE. Some of the mistakes will remain, but I think overall the list it's more or less accurate.
The you talked about a very low turnout. What percentages are we talking about? I mean, at what point does this election of judges basically have very little credibility or value, I guess, even though people will be seated as judges, but what percentage are we talking about, and what impact will that have on this whole process?
Well, uh, midterm elections have low rates of turnout, um, which is about 50% of the voters list. Presidential elections have a higher rate of turnout, which is around 60%. Um, uh, I don't think these judicial elections are going to be any close to these turnout rates. Um, I think that they will be similar to the popular to the referendum that we had in 2021, which was 7%, and and the recall that we have in 2022 that was 17%. I think it will be something between these two low figures, 7, 17%, which are very low rates of turnout comparative to the election comparative to presidential elections or midterm elections where only members of the Chamber of Deputies are elected.
Could you just remind us how this election of judges is going to be different than just regular elections where where especially those elections where you're electing senators, the presidential elections, Congress. I mean, there are a lot of people face or have to be elected that day, but this election of judges seems to be extremely much more complicated because of the number of number of people involved in the ballots. Can you just explain to us what is the complexity of this election?
Absolutely. The number of candidates is much higher than any election, because the electorate is going to be voting for to renew more than 800 elected offices, and the number of candidates, it's very, very high. For instance, in the case of the 9 Supreme Justices, you will have to choose 9 among 81 candidates. So you will have before you a list of 81 candidates, and you have to choose 9 Supreme Justices from them. I mean, the electorate is completely unfamiliar with this kind of elections. The amount of information that they will have to make this decision, it's very little. Another aspect in which another aspect in which these elections are going to be very different as well is, you are not going to know the candidates you will have to vote for, because basically the ads that the Electoral Institute is going to be broadcasting during the campaigns are going to refer you to a web page where you can learn about the candidates. But very, very, I mean, this is completely unprecedented. I don't think people are going to. The electorate is going to visit these websites and get information about who these people who are asking for their votes are, and that's another aspect in which these elections are going to be different. Very little information, very complex about the candidates, and a very complex ballot that the electorate is not going to know exactly what to do about it.
Joining us today is Benito Nacif, Dr. Benito Nacif. He's been joining us throughout the years. He's a former commissioner on the National Electoral Institute, or Federal Electoral Institute. It was called IFE at that time. How many people are going to be? I mean, how many names are going to be on these ballots? Do we know how many ballots and how many names are we talking about? Do you have a sense?
Yes, I think we are going to have 6 ballots, and some of them are going to have as many as 81 candidates, from which you have to choose 9, which are the candidates for Supreme Justices.
Right.
In other cases, you're going to have a larger number of candidates for district judges and circuit federal district magistrates for federal courts. In 17 of the 32 states, you are going to have also local judicial elections. So that means that you're going to have more than 6 ballots for this kind of elections, probably 9 or 10, depending on the state. So this is going to be very, very complicated for the voter.
A couple last questions, because I'm so confused in terms of what happens after the elections. When are the new judges supposed to be sworn in? And when do they start working? Because it's going to be just this massive turnover. We're talking about half of the Mexican judicial system is going to be is basically going to be leaving their positions, and then you have this whole new wave. All these judges that were elected are going to come into. They're supposed to be seated, but I just can't imagine what that transition is going to look like, Benito.
Yeah. Well, basically, we will be renewing um, about 50% of all district judges and court of appeals at the federal level, and it's going to happen also at the local level in these 17 federal states. Um, uh, and this week there was a discussion um, in the High Court of the Electoral Tribunal about the model for the tabulation of the votes. Um, we use a model that was adopted in the 1990s, where the tabulation of votes takes place at the polling stations, and are the citizens that do the tabulation.
Right.
This is not going to happen this time because of the complexity of the ballot. So the ballots are going to travel from the polling stations to the INE offices at the district level, uncounted, and the tabulation is going to be done by INE officials. So this is completely new. And that's why there was this discussion in the Federal Electoral Tribunal. Some of the magistrates were opposed to this change. After the INE officials do the tabulation and publish the results of these elections, you can challenge the results at the Electoral Tribunal. There is a period in which the Electoral Tribunal will review these appellations, and then the Electoral Tribunal will announce the final results or the definitive results sometime in August. And the new district judges, magistrates of courts of appeals, and supreme justices will be taking office in September. That is how the electoral calendar was defined after the constitutional reform.
Well, I still have so many questions, but let's leave it at that right now. That's where we are right now, this weekend, as the country just is gearing forward and preparing for the elections of judges the first Sunday in June. And I mean, literally, it's going to be a mystery in many ways how this is going to end up, what this is going to look like on the second weekend of June after the elections take place. So I really appreciate you joining us, Benito Nacif. Dr. Benito Nacif has been joining us throughout the years. He's expert on electoral law and legislation in Mexico, and I would say even around the world. He's the former commissioner on the Federal Electoral Institute. Thank you so much for joining us, Benito.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico.